All right, that, turn on this. All right, yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Man, it's been a minute, you know what? And just to be totally transparent with you guys, I wasn't really planning on filming this video tonight, or really talking about this specific topic, but I have received so many questions about this. I figured I would at least address it because I haven't really kind of given you guys a final answer on what I'm doing about my cameras and everything like that, especially with a couple of videos that I've put out talking about if I was going to keep the R5, was I going to sell it, am I going to start using the Sony a7S III instead? And spoiler, I actually did cancel my Sony a7S III pre-order, and I am sticking with the Canon R5. Now, before anybody comes at my neck for keeping this camera over switching to Sony and everything like that, I do want to explain my decision a little bit. Now, I will say I love Sony's system. I actually use mostly Sony's for work and in my professional work. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them, and honestly, the Sony a7S III might be the best camera out right now to do video work, especially in the YouTube world. But the R5 I think fits my needs a little bit more, and especially after the latest firmware update, I really haven't ran into any issues with this camera at all, and it kind of just fits me and my workflow a little bit better, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Now, in case you guys didn't know, this channel actually started out with me using a Sony camera. So my actual first video, and actually first few videos I think, was using the Sony a7R III, which is a fantastic camera. I love that camera, but the more I was doing YouTube content, and especially trying to vlog, I decided to switch over to the Canon EOS R, and I absolutely loved that camera. So I fell in love with the flip out screen. The image quality out of that camera looked fantastic. So fast forward a couple months, I decided I wanted a second camera body just for different projects I was doing and everything like that. And instead of buying two of the same camera, I figured why not buy the Canon EOS RP. It's a little bit cheaper, it's still a full frame camera, and then that way I could also review it for you guys. Now, I don't want to talk way too much about the EOS R and the RP because I've already talked about those cameras quite a bit on this channel, and I have videos talking about both those cameras very in depth if you guys want to check those out. So that kind of brings us up to when they finally announced the R5 officially. Canon fully revealed it. Peter McKinnon put out his videos on them, everything like that, and this camera was the real deal. So pretty much every single person I know, every camera system, they were considering switching to this camera because it seemed so unreal. So obviously I pre-ordered that thing right away, and then a couple issues started coming out about this camera. One being that IBIS wobble, and then the second thing, which is the much bigger problem, is the overheating. So I'm not gonna waste a whole bunch of time in this video talking about that, because as much as the overheating was a problem with this camera, Canon already put out one firmware update that has drastically increased the limits before this camera overheats and everything like that. And basically, I have not ran into any overheating issues with this camera since that firmware update whatsoever. Now, right before the R5 shipped, of course, Sony dropped the info on the Sony a7S III, which kudos to them. That's pretty much the funniest way that they could do marketing. So Sony definitely killed it with that. The timing of it is honestly hilarious, because I can't imagine how many thousands of R5 pre-orders people canceled, because it had to have been a ton. But especially with me not knowing exactly how bad these issues were going to be in the R5 at that time, I definitely did consider switching back to Sony, and I was really caught up in this whole camera battle, I guess, at that time, right? Because in the real world, you kind of just rent whatever camera fits your need or fits that project, right? So if you run into a project where you need to use a RED for something, or you need to shoot an 8K for something, or you need to shoot 1,000 frames per second, you go rent that specific camera for that job. But for whatever reason in the YouTube world, or when people decide to buy a camera, it kind of seems like a life or death decision. So it's kind of like once you commit to a brand or you commit to a camera, you just have to stick with that. And I don't know exactly why that has happened. I think buying a personal camera is just a very, I guess, personal decision and personal choice, because it's a lot of money for yourself. But yeah, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but really I'm just trying to say that when you kind of start diving into this tech stuff and this camera stuff in the YouTube world, especially when you're ready to make a big purchase or a big upgrade, it's very easy to kind of fall into the trap of you have to make the perfect decision, right? Because you can never change it in the future. if you pick Canon, you have to use Canon forever. If you pick Sony forever. It's kind of the same with people between like building a computer or buying a MacBook, right? Like you can only do one, you're not allowed to do both. And I think I definitely just started going down this path of me trying to make the absolute perfect decision, even though honestly, most people probably can't even tell on YouTube if you're filming in 8K or 720p, just to be totally honest. But at the end of the day, it's more about finding the camera that kind of fits your needs and what you actually use it for, or maybe what you're already invested in as well. Now, you guys may have noticed over the last couple months, my uploads have been a little bit less frequent, and that actually was intentional. I'm not going to touch on this a whole bunch in this video. This isn't really what this video is about, but some priorities changed, some personal life things changed. And also work really picked up, and even just as much as me physically going back into work, not working from home, just my whole schedule was kind of flipped upside down. And it's actually been really good for my mental health and just me be able to kind of reset a bit, but also kind of make a better plan for the YouTube channel moving forward. And don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, that's for sure. Just trying to do things a little bit better in the future. But me being forced to kind of take a step back a bit, I kind of was able to look at the whole situation from afar and just from kind of a different angle, I guess, because I was no longer obsessing over cameras every single day. I wasn't just watching hours of YouTube videos, hearing other people talk about cameras. Should I switch? What was their experience? Which one looks better? All that kind of stuff, right? I honestly just didn't have time to worry about that stuff anymore. So this is just kind of what ended up happening. I had the R5 because I purchased it, I got it, I reviewed it, and then by the time the Sony a7S III came out, I honestly just wasn't really concerned about it anymore because I already had this camera. It was working pretty good for me, especially once that firmware update came out. And I think once I kind of had a breath of fresh air and I was able to just kind of see how obsessive and just how focused I was on making sure I had the perfect camera, and honestly it just kind of made my decision a lot easier. So it comes down to pretty much a few things why I decided to keep the R5 over switching to the Sony a7S III. The first thing is pretty obvious. I already had two Canon bodies. So I had the EOS R and I also still have the Canon EOS RP. So now that I have the R5, I have all three of those cameras. So for me to switch back to the Sony lineup, I would have to sell 3 camera bodies, like 3 or 4 lenses, and that just doesn't really make too much sense. Now, one thing I will say for anybody that ever does want to switch camera systems, the nice thing about cameras is as long as you take care of them, you do get a pretty good amount of money back out of them whenever you decide to sell them. But when you're talking about selling multiple camera bodies, multiple lenses, all this kind of stuff, not only is it a pain to find somebody to buy all these things, it's going to take some time, and also you probably will lose a decent amount of money. So that's one thing that made the decision a lot easier. Obviously, I already had camera bodies and camera lenses invested in the Canon lineup. The second part of the decision that made it pretty easy for me was the fact that once that firmware update came out about the overheating, and it really fixed any of my issues with it. Like I said, since I've now used this camera with that firmware update over the past, I guess it's been almost a month and a half, 2 months now, have never ran into the overheating whatsoever when I'm taking photos, videos, slow motion, 4K HQ, any of that stuff. The way I've been shooting, the way I've been using this camera, I don't run into the overheating anymore. So for me, that was one of the big reasons why I might switch away from this camera, but since I haven't ran into it, it's really a non-factor for me anymore. Now, the third thing that kind of made my decision easy when I decided to keep the R5 over the Sony a7S III, or honestly any other camera, is the fact that this is such a high megapixel count. Now, some people might argue that the Sony's 12 megapixels is plenty for all types of photos, and you don't need anything more than that. And I would definitely say that if all you're shooting is thumbnails and photos for Instagram or Twitter, that really might be the case, and the Sony a7S III might be the perfect all-in-one camera for you. But the way that I shoot photos and I edit them, the way that I'm used to honestly delivering content to people and companies, and also I'm in a professional field where all the cameras that we use in our studio are at least like 40 or 50 megapixels. That's just kind of what I'm used to. So for me, it was honestly important to have a camera that had a higher megapixel. And honestly, not to go on a tangent, but I think the photo abilities of the R5 might be the best photo camera out right now. And honestly, be on the lookout because I might be making a whole video dedicated to talking about why the R5 is such a beast of a camera for photos, between the IBIS, how many frames per second you can shoot for photos, the high megapixel, the way that you can silently shoot. Honestly, I could go on and on about the capabilities for the photos within this camera, but in short, yeah, this is amazing photo camera, and the fact that it's that good of a photo camera and it can shoot all this amazing video content as well, pretty much as good as the Sony a7S III. For me, it's really important to have an all-in-one camera for both photos and videos. If I'm going on a trip and I just want to take one camera body, this can do pretty much everything for me. This really might be the perfect all-in-one camera for me in my workflow right now. So yeah, guys, those are just some of my overall feelings and thoughts on why I decided to stay with the R5 instead of switching over to Sony. And I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but the Sony a7S III sounds like an amazing camera, and I do hope that I can get my hands on it eventually. Maybe I can even review it for you guys myself and kind of get my take on it. But right now, the R5 just works a little bit better for my personal situation, and honestly, I'm really stoked on that decision. So guys, if you stuck around this far into the video, first of all, I really appreciate you, but also I just want to reiterate how important it is to kind of figure out what fits you the most. Is it time for you to upgrade? Is it time for you to switch? What do you actually need out of your equipment? And be honest with yourself. Do you actually need to upgrade your equipment, or do you actually need to switch? Are you actually running into limitations with your equipment, whether it be your cameras, your computers, etc.? Because honestly, this is a slippery slope and a very expensive field, that is for sure. But you know, I really hope with this channel I can kind of inform you guys with my experience so far. Are things worth buying or not? And any content that I'm making on this channel, I'm trying to help you guys out in some way. So hopefully you guys were able to find some value out of this video, and I really do appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. If you did enjoy this video, will you drop it a thumbs up? That really helps the channel out. Let me know in the comments below what type of content you guys want to see in the future here for the channel. I am planning on doing a little bit more R5 content, talking a little bit about my menu system, what settings I've been using for both photos and videos, so be on the lookout for that. But yeah, let me know what you guys want to see. Do you guys want to see more camera content? Do you want to see more R5 content? Or maybe we get a little bit more into the business side of things. All right, guys, I need to just stop rambling right here. Honestly, I think I'm starting to, funny enough, lose my voice because I haven't talked on camera like this in a very long time. So you guys have to forgive me if my voice has been going out a little bit. I think I got my Yeti here full of water. If only this was like pink or something, it'd probably be a little bit cooler. But yeah, guys, I'm gonna stop just rambling. I know this video might be a little bit long, but I just want to kind of share my thoughts. So I really appreciate you guys as always, and I will catch you guys in the next video very, very soon. Peace, guys.